I wanted to call this topic something else. It's actually pretty insensitive to use this terminology, but I want to talk about Crazy Uncle Eric.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason Jim and I are kind of giggling, because I said that at the beginning of the show, and Jim goes, how are you going to have a conversation with somebody if you start off the conversation insulting someone? Because it automatically polarizes everybody in the conversation. I totally agree with you. But what I meant was to invoke those feelings about the...
Well, we're not having a conversation with him, so fuck him. I'm just saying that... it's like... I'm talking about people in general these days.
Yeah.
I'm talking about Crazy Uncle Eric.
Well, I'm talking about the fact that, like, everybody has a relative, and for some reason it seems to be an uncle for most people that is just like has their own set of views about the world and their own way of doing things. And Eric, okay, so let's talk about the positive image of Eric that most players my age have of Eric, not realizing that he has a sordid history, right? So maybe some of the more woke amongst us probably know about some of his sordid history. But like Eric was a guy that he was a session player. He had a lot of the same beginning stuff as like Jimmy Page, for example. He was playing a lot of London sessions with a lot of big bands. He landed he did Mayall after Cream, right? That wasn't before, or was it before?
Yeah, right.
So it was before or
after?
Okay, it was after. So he does Cream with Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce. Becomes a household name as a guitar player, singer. And songwriter, which they all sang in that band, I think, at some point. I think even Ginger Baker, right? If I recall. I need to get back into Cream. I haven't listened to a lot of Cream lately. But I know Jack Bruce was the primary vocalist in that band.
Right.
So, right. Let's talk about Cream. Cream is just incredible music, right? Like, everybody knows Cream. They know Sunshine of Your Love. They know, the whole Wheels of Fire record and all the different stuff that they did over their time period. If you don't, you should check the material out. There's a lot of great stuff there. Then he goes and joins...
I was wrong. Cream was after Mayall.
That's what I was
thinking. Yardbirds, Mayall... Yardbirds, Bluesbreakers, Cream.
Right.
Traffic for about a minute and a half.
Right. Yeah, so actually Yardbirds is probably the more interesting thing to talk about even than Cream, because that was the intersection moment for Jeff Beck, for Eric Clapton, and Jimmy Page. Those three guys all were in the Yardbirds in some capacity at some point, with Jimmy Page walking away actually owning the band's name. And they all had different capacities. I believe Jimmy Page and Eric Clapton were in the band at the same time, and then Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck as well. I believe that's how that worked. Because
and he was the bass player for one of the two.
Yeah, he was the bass player alongside Jeff Beck, I believe.
Beck, right?
Yeah. So that's it's all water under the bridge. long time ago, and a lot of those gentlemen have some very interesting histories behind them. Obviously, there's been the allegations of pedophilia from Jimmy Page, and of course we've all talked about that being a different time and those things being looked at differently at that point in time. But basically, the point is, like, when you look at the stuff in retrospect, most people they're like, yeah, it was a different point in time, and it's disgusting, but like, what are you gonna do, right? But when you look at this stuff today, and in a different context, like we're about to do as a result of an article that went out. And this has been brewing for a while. I remember reading about this stuff in 2019 and then 2020 as well. Mostly in 2020 because of the civil unrest. That, Clapton hasn't always been everybody's favorite dude. He went through this time period where like everybody was looking at Clapton as the god of guitar, right? Like he was the guy. And they were literally painting Clapton as God everywhere all over England, and it actually ended up becoming an album cover. And he was always reluctant about it, but I think, like, how can you remain reluctant about it when you're making money off of it? Like, how can you? There's a little bit of like, that's a weird juxtaposition, right?
Yep.
So, long story short, that is he plays with all these famous people over the years. He does a record with B.B. King, and then he sort of just kind of fades into like retirement. He does an acoustic record that's really well regarded. He tours until he finally retires. He does a final farewell thing with Cream where they all get back together. That was sometime in the early 2000s. And then he kind of just fades out of the scene, and then he announces his retirement after doing some big guitar festivals. Okay, so he hasn't toured in quite a while. He had a 2020 tour booked, if I recall. That obviously was canceled and displaced due to COVID. Sometime in 2021, he received I believe it was early 2021, he received the vaccine. Didn't go so well for him. He had some health complications as a result of it. And ever since, he's just been kind of like in the media and out of the media over and over for things like, this is the big one that probably everybody on the show is going to already be familiar with. But he's been canceling dates and or rescheduling dates based around the fact that the venue will not allow non-COVID vaccinated people in the venue. Now, this is a bigger problem outside the United States, but it has been a problem in the States as well. Outside the United States, because the governments are different and they have different health rules, they can actually order this. And this has been a thing in England that certain places are over a certain capacity are not allowed to have hold events in certain areas without, everybody being vaccinated. So they have to have proof of vaccination, or I don't know how they're actually pulling that off. But basically, like, different municipalities in Europe have different ideas about that. And they have different enforcement because they're not the U.S. So long story short is he has been very, very vocal about the problems that he has had with the vaccine and how they affected him specifically, and tried to apply that to many other people. And this is where the issue comes in. So a lot of people don't remember or don't realize, because they're too young, don't realize that in the 1970s, he had like a racial tirade on stage and was reportedly behind the scenes a very devout, like only white national British people kind of person. Which we don't think about racism outside the context of the United States much, but that's like a big thing in Europe too. Because they take in a lot of refugee populations from Africa and from the Middle East. And it's been a huge problem in England because, of course, going back to when they were, in an imperial power in India and China, holding Hong Kong until the late 90s when they started to turn it back over to local rule. Like, you think about that and you put it in context, you understand that there's this huge issue here, right? So like a lot of people, so he recanted these statements, and I believe it was around 1980 where he had like a heart-to-heart interview with somebody and basically just like kind of sat down and said, I was drugged up out of my mind and drunk. And he had a lot of drug problems. So everybody knows that. And he kind of got a pass. Okay. He kind of got a pass. He walked away from it. Now, here's where things get interesting. So as a result of his stance on the vaccine, which is that you shouldn't get it if you don't want to. And or you shouldn't get it at all, really. Which, depending on who you ask, like, that varies. And depending on the day in the interview, that varies from him. Here's where the issue lies. He's been giving money to groups, and this has been, apparently there's record of this, giving money to groups in the last year that are anti-vax, but are also conspiracy theorist groups, and also white nationalist groups, or have ties to white nationalist groups, at least, in the UK. And that this is all tied into his former beliefs as a quote unquote, junkie in the 70s, that, maybe he didn't let all those ideas go. And so wrap your head around this. So, like, we all know that Eric Clapton's career is based on playing what is essentially black music, right? He was very, very much into the 50s and 60s blues guys, even going back to the 30s and 40s blues guys, referencing people all the way back even to, who's the guy that played Dust My Broom? Robert Johnson, okay? Going all the way back that far. And then he sits on stage and says, we shouldn't have any black people in Britain kind of stuff. And then here he goes and recants. Now 30 years later, he's still got ties to that kind of attitude. Like, this is a very troublesome thing. It's not that he said those statements and then he walked away from it. It's that he's circling back on those statements. even though he's recanted it, which makes you wonder, like, what is Eric Clapton going through right now? Now, Jim, you brought up before the show, we actually had a little brief discussion about this. And you brought up the sycophantic thing, and I think you're probably the one to talk about that most. But I'm going to let you have the floor for a bit because I think you can.
Well, yeah,
probably lend
I
some
just
to
think that when somebody, there's a couple of very nuanced and really I don't want to go down too far down the path discussions that could be had, but I wanted to talk to this, and that is, number one, if somebody sits around and says you're God, this, and we've seen this lately in our own politics, by the way.
It's worship.
Whether it be on one side or the other of the aisle, I'm not going to pick a side because there is no side. There shouldn't be a side. That's been the problem for a long time.
Right.
And so people who come at me, everybody comes at me from both sides because they think I'm on a side, and I'm not on a side. I'm on a side of shut the fuck up and be real.
Yeah. Right.
And the fact is that there's too many sycophants, regardless of who these people are. And when someone is being told how wonderful and great and perfect and outstanding and, blah, blah, blah they are, let's look at the great fall of Andrew Cuomo most recently. Okay? There were late night show hosts, not just one or two, several, and daytime hosts and all these people who were saying they were
Cuomo supporters.
Cuomo support, not only Cuomo support, but Cuomo-sexuals, they called themselves. I mean, there was literally a word, Cuomo-sexual. And it got to the point where those are the same people. They go, oh, look what we did. We put this person on a pedestal. Maybe we shouldn't have. And the problem that we have is when someone is put so high, they don't think there's any way they can fall. They think that the base of their pedestal is too strong. And, does that diminish the music that he made? I don't think so. There's a lot of beauty in some of the stuff that he created.
I don't think most of it deals with that subject matter. And so you can separate the music from the person in that regard. Right.
And so, it's not like a David Allan record from the 70s, take my word for it. It's that we have this thing about Eric Clapton. I don't mince my words when I speak of celebrities in any way, shape, or form.
Treat them like people and your friends. Like, hold them responsible in the same ways.
Right. Exactly. And I'm not going to give them a pass because they're making, like Demi Lovato lately, making these weird rants about things that don't make any sense. I guess she's our crazy Aunt Debbie. There's this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Aliens. No, it's just this thing where people need to say, okay, you know what? I love you, and I think you're great. But you need to change this, or I can't be, I can't support you. I can't be buying your albums and listening to your music and doing these things. I've got to pull it back because you need help. You need to find a new path. And, and maybe they'll go, you know what? Fuck you. I'm not taking a new path. And you know what? You have every right to say that. But the problem with that sycophantic behavior is it gives everyone a pass. I just saw a thing with Jon Stewart on CNN. He was talking about that, how people tend to give a pass to people they support.
Sure.
And he was talking about both sides of the aisle. Do you know how CNN is? That means that the right wing is bad. And he was like, no, I didn't say that. I said, stop giving people a pass when they don't deserve it.
Well, I mean, so, I think this is an argument that's sort of devoid of politics at this point. This is about, just sticking to your own principles. I mean, by all means, if you believe that people shouldn't be vaccinated, go see a Eric Clapton concert and, just understand that many of those other people there do not agree with you. And I think it's a fair assumption at this point to say that I don't think he has much of a career touring if he continues up with this kind of conversation. In fact, one of the things I felt was interesting about the NBC article was they talked about how his views in the 70s, like that rant he went through, inspired a lot of his like contemporaries to basically go out and hold these big anti events to what he was saying. You know, people like good friends of his, like Pete Townsend. So think about that for a minute. Like in its own way, it actually ended up inspiring a lot of people to do good.
Exactly. In its own way, I watched an interview with someone who was talking about the fact that he actually, it's kind of like he's like, what's that character from All in the Family? Archie Bunker.
Yeah.
Kind of like Archie Bunker. And of course, Carroll O'Connor played Archie Bunker to the T because Archie Bunker was the antithesis of everything Carroll O'Connor was, by the way. Carroll O'Connor was the exact opposite of him. So he made him the befuddling fool that he was to do that. Now, Eric Clapton isn't playing a character. He's playing himself on a stage of the planet, right?
As far as we know, maybe he's trying to, that could be a thing, you know, he may be just like so out in left field that he's trying to appeal to a fan base or a group of people that simply doesn't exist.
Right. And so by doing what he's doing, he's actually creating a positive energy flow, which is weird. Okay. It's strange, but it does work. Against him, going to work against him. He's not going to sell a lot of tickets. You know what? He's Eric Clapton. There's going to be people who go and go to his shows, and I'm not going to, if a friend of mine says, I went to see Eric Clapton the other day, I'm not going to say, you must be this kind of...
Same. I honestly, like, I get the intense respect that people have for him as a musician.
I don't think he's been relevant since the 70s. I wouldn't pay to see Eric Clapton brush his teeth, much less play guitar. I mean, I'm just not gonna. It's not gonna happen.
I agree on the relevance perspective. For the most part, I mean, obviously, about the time you get to Journeyman is really when people they're not emulating what he's doing after that. Okay, so I think that's sort of the end of his tenure there is being relevant. I do want to preface one thing. So, like, I'm not mad because of the anti-vax stuff, because I sort of understand, like, you have your position on that. And I think that that's a personal choice, right?
People should, right.
And I also know of people that literally cannot get vaccinated because they have other health issues and or exposure to things. I know somebody who's a veteran who's actually been exposed to chemicals in Iraq who is not allowed to get vaccinations. Okay.
Yep.
Because it could be harmful to his health. And so as a result of that, like, there are definitely both biological, chemical reasons that you cannot get a vaccine. Like, I get it. And so you can't make everyone do it. And I understand that part of it. But by all means, if you are concerned for your own health and your own family, get vaccinated. Like, if you think that you're going to be perfectly fine without it, I understand that's a choice that you're making and that you have weighed your options.
But it should be made with your doctor.
Well, but it should be
made in a bubble.
But
it shouldn't be made because you made a YouTube channel. It should be because you consulted your doctor, and like that guy that you were just talking about, the doctor said, you know what? You shouldn't do this.
Or you take your own you take your own health tact, right?
That's right.
But don't place what you're doing on others.
On other people.
That needs to stop. And that's where I have a problem with Eric Clapton, because he had a negative reaction to a vaccine. All people must be having this negative reaction, which is simply not borne out in the data from any country. From any country. No matter whether it's AstraZeneca or the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, the what's the third one, J&J, or even the Chinese vaccine or the Russian vaccine, which I can't even pronounce the names of those, that are all being circulated throughout various places in the globe. So I just want to point that out. Like, I get it if you can't or if you've chosen not to. I'm not telling you you're wrong. What I'm telling you is the stance for you to go out there with zero details and zero real knowledge, because you do have zero real knowledge. You are not a doctor.
That's right.
You do not have access to the data in a way that is meaningful, because you're seeing it through the filter of however you're accessing this information. Understand that this is between you and your doctor, and not between you and the public. Whether your buddy Joe gives a crap about whether you got vaccinated is totally irrelevant. Okay?
Yep.
But to stand and use your platform as Eric Clapton has done, and also tie it to other things like racism in the past, which aligns with things you've said in the past, and other political agendas by donating to organizations is dangerous, and it's irresponsible, and that we should at least acknowledge that your viewpoints are kind of turning into crazy Uncle Eric. And so
I'll just leave it at this. If you as an individual, not you personally, as an individual listener, wants to say you should make your own mind up, you have the right to make up your own mind, then you shouldn't be trying to convince other people to make up their mind in your way. It comes to that we have this. We see it with guitars. Oh, you should play Fenders. I play Fenders. They're great.
I'm not convincing you to play a Strat.
You haven't convinced me to play a Strat. I mean, the fact is, I say that funny. I know. I have a nice one. It's right there. Where is it? Right there. The fact is that, all joking aside, we see that a lot. I play Les Pauls. You should play Les Pauls. I hate weight relieved Les Pauls. You should hate weight relieved Les Pauls. I hate the 2015 tuners on Les Pauls. You should hate those. It comes down to the most. Every time somebody finds something they can, and I use Les Pauls as an example. Every time somebody finds something they can agree on, they find something about it they can disagree on. I drive an Audi. Yeah, you drive an Audi? Yeah, me too. What do you have? I have a A3. Well, I have an A5, so mine is better than yours. I mean, it's as if life is some kind of, you need to agree with me and you need to do the same things as me. It's like that.
Everybody is always looking for validation.
Yeah, it's like that line in David Bowie's Space Oddity where he says, and everyone wants to know the type of shirt you wear or the kind of shirt you wear.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like that. Who cares?
Well, but
who cares? That's going to go to the next thing I talk about. By the way,
all right, we're gonna flip topics, but before we do that,
go to Mike Rutherford.
Oh yeah, but before we do that, I want to have one little tidbit about validation in the case of Eric Clapton. So you're probably asking yourself, why is Clapton standing there saying these things with such conviction? And that's because he's been validated. He's been validated by money. Because so many people have paid him and reinforced the idea that you have a valid platform to speak about any topic that you feel is relevant and important to you. Even though we really should be saying, why are you talking about medical issues?
Shut up, play guitar.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, where have you been the last 5 years? You didn't even want to leave your house. You know?
Right.
So anyway, also, we won't talk about that. I was going to talk about Kiss's farewell tour, but we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because I don't really believe it's a farewell tour, but that's a topic for another episode, or maybe bonus content before we get to the gig report.